You're listening to The Green Flag with your hosts, Lukas Wacker and Kyle Cushman.
Well, that happened. Texas. Where do you start with that? What a crazy weekend in the Lone Star State to open up the round of 12 for the NASCAR Cup Series, as we saw chaos left, right, and center throughout the entire race. Felt like there was cautions every couple of laps. It was the longest race I feel like I ever watched, and that includes the Coca-Cola 600 that we had this year. So lots and lots to kind of break down, especially the aftermath between Denny Hamlin and William Byron and the penalties that were assessed specifically to obviously William Byron. And then what does that look like for the playoffs, and what does that do for the playoffs moving forward as we head into a not easier track by any means in Talladega after what we've seen on the super speedway races so far this season. So we'll talk about that. Jimmie Johnson retiring from full-time racing as well. We'll mention that, talk about what we want to see from him in the future. And then, of course, our Talladega draft as per usual to finish off the episode. But before we get into all of that, how you doing today, Kyle?
Doing good. Yeah. You kind of mentioned the chaos that we had last weekend. And it's funny because we called it the chaos round, the round of 12. And we thought this would be the calm race out of all of it. And so, yeah, we're going from the chaos that was Texas and going to Talladega, which I'm sure will be much calmer and no controversies, no storylines, nothing will come out of that, of course.
No, of course not. And of course, we mentioned last week, teeing up Texas. This is the race where you're going to want to bank some points, settle in, have a nice, easy day so that you don't have to depend.
A couple guys got to do it, but not many.
And then one of them we thought did, and then they get a penalty afterwards as well. I don't know how you define a race like that. Obviously not a good look for NASCAR and the sport as a whole. All the tire issues that were happening, that needs to be addressed ASAP. We can talk about that in a minute as well. But we got to talk first off, Kyle, with the big news that came out of Texas. William Byron versus Denny Hamlin. Once again, Denny Hamlin roughing it up with a couple of guys, but this time he's on the bit more of a receiving end again as well. William Byron, of course, and Denny Hamlin came to blows during the race where Hamlin, ran him a little bit wide off of turn 2, and then Byron hit the wall. Byron said after the race that it bent the toe link. Obviously, we don't know that for sure, but, all reports indicate the 24 didn't quite have the speed that he had earlier in the race. So I think a little bit of damage was done during that wall contact.
Some kind of damage, yeah.
Some of it at the very least. So then Byron took exception to that, of course, and bumped Denny Hamlin and gassed up under caution after Martin Truex Jr. crashed from the lead with a blown tire. So Denny Hamlin loses his spot. He falls back, and then he comes up and kind of roughs William Byron a little bit up. Doesn't spin him out or anything, but definitely gets up there to, show his displeasure with the 24 car under caution after trying to regain his place, but NASCAR did not allow it. And of course, NASCAR has then said after the race via Scott Miller that they had no eyes on the situation with Denny Hamlin and William Byron, as they were more concerned with the cleanup and the procedure going on to the 19 car at the time that was crashed in turn 3 and 4. So lots of different storylines here to kind of delve into, but I think we kind of open up with the penalties. William Byron was assessed a 25-point penalty for his actions of spinning Denny Hamlin and bumping him under caution, sending the 11 back through the field. Then he recovered to a 10th place finish. And then he also got a $50,000 fine on top of that. But the points penalty in the playoffs is obviously the most major part of the storyline, as it drops William Byron from a pretty decent spot at plus 17 to now being below the cutoff line, the second guy below the cutoff line at -8 behind Austin Cindric, who is -7. So the bubble totally switched after that penalty was assessed. Lots of guys looking a little bit even more comfortable, and some of them just getting a little bit more composed after a very tough Texas race for sure. So that's kind of the gist of what happened at Texas. I'm sure all of you guys have seen it, talked about it, have thought about it in your head, but we got to break it down here, Kyle. First off, what do you make of the entire incident as a whole? And then do you think the penalty was fair to William Byron? Was it too harsh, or was it not harsh enough?
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation because NASCAR before this has had kind of a clear kind of picture of what the penalty is for wrecking somebody under caution. And it's usually been you get thrown out of the race and you get suspended for a week. And it's not just the Kyle Busch one going way back, but also I think it was Johnny Sauter a couple years ago who did it at Martinsville or something like that. I can't remember exactly where it is. But
Iowa.
Yeah, I think it was actually. Yeah. And so that's usually been what the penalty is. And now, granted, Denny Hamlin was able to continue in the race, still had a good finish, blah, blah, blah. They apparently didn't have eyes on it, which seems like a cop out to me in trying to save face. Because I don't know how you don't have eyes on it when you literally have an in-car camera for every single car.
And the social team posted it. Exactly.
But I think this is probably the best way to handle the situation after making an initial mistake. The 25-point penalty is roughly what it would have been in terms of the difference in points had Byron been held a lap. Roughly 25 points is the difference there. And it doesn't completely ruin his playoffs either. It puts him -8, so he's behind the cut line. He has room to get back up there and advance, but he's also behind the 8 ball now, which I think, looking at what happened in terms of the incident itself, what happened in terms of the outcome, and what ended up happening in the race himself for Byron, I think all of that taken into account, I think the 25-point penalty is a pretty fair assessment of how everything went down, to be honest. I think being held a lap is probably the right penalty for that. And that's roughly what the 25 points ended up being. So I think after initially making a pretty bad mistake on NASCAR's part by not catching this, by not penalizing it in the moment, all those kind of things. A couple of days later, I think they rectified it fairly well with the 25-point penalty here.
I think NASCAR was put in a box, the way that they handled this entire situation, right? So if they saw it and, let's say they did, and then they addressed the penalty in the race, they held them a lap, they put them to the tail end of the longest line, whatever they decided to do, and they saw it and they caught it and they penalized Byron, we'd have no points penalty or anything like that. Let's just make that clear. But the fact that they didn't do that, and then they came out after the race to the media and then said, we didn't see it, but we're going to take a look at it more thoroughly. You knew a penalty of some sort was coming down because they made the mistake, and then B, because it is warrant. You can't allow something like that to just go unpenalized. Like, at the end of the day,
that opens a huge can of worms.
As much as boys have at it is, very much in play. This is not the case here with wrecking a guy under caution. And what we've seen with this next gen car with the hits, obviously Denny Hamlin spun through the infield. It didn't end up damaging his car, unlike what we've seen in the past with some of these next gen cars going through the grass where it damages the diffuser. It didn't seem like it was too bad, because at least the 11 car still recovered to a top 10 finish. But for Byron, if he didn't say after the race that he did it on purpose, he may not have ended up getting this harsh of a penalty either.
I don't know.
I think that there could be something to that, because until usually you admit to it.
But the fact that NASCAR
video kind of takes a little bit of a backseat.
Up.
Oh, 100%. He's a guilty man. Guilty man.
Yeah.
But, they could always try and wiggle their way out of it. I was checking my gauges or something, right? Like, all that stuff. You can play coy.
Ignorance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he didn't do that. He was so fired up after the race with the post-race interview with Parker that he was like, yeah, I mean, I did it. Like, I totally did it on purpose. I didn't mean to wreck him, but I mean, I definitely meant to, get into him. So it was, from that perspective, I think the fact that Byron pleaded guilty basically after the race, the onboard footage is criminating in itself.
Yeah.
And, Denny Hamlin and Chris Gabehart's theatrics on the radio, of course, you're going to be upset in that situation. Then Hamlin takes to social media. All of these different things pile up on top of each other, and NASCAR had no choice but to penalize the 24 car. For me, 25 points in a playoff situation like this, it's probably justified for the fact that, if he was sent to the longest line, I think he would have recovered some of those spots. I would have preferred maybe like a 15-point penalty maybe instead of 25, because I mean, he's below the cutoff line by 8 points. Now that's not, it's a smaller margin, but it's not, 2 points or 1 point, or he's like right above the cutoff line. So he's got some work to do in the next 2 races. So when you look at that, and where you look at what Hamlin was able to recover to, I don't know if it's quite there with 25 points at the end of the day. The $50,000 fine on top of that is just kind of like a status quo thing. You have to almost do that, a fine in any of the situations. So that doesn't really matter. But for the 24 car, I think they almost maximized their day to a large part at Texas. And just this one incident like this, it's not a little incident, this is a big one, has ended up costing them big time here, as they have to change their approach entirely going into the next two races, depending on what happens at Talladega for sure. So, I mean, NASCAR, they got to do something to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future, where they don't have eyes immediately on something like this. Like, I mean, the 11 car spinning through the grass, how did that happen under caution? You can put point A, you can put the two dots together and figure it out. And then him taking to Byron's bumper during the caution as well. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you can put it all together and get a picture on what exactly happened to the 11 car. But you know, I agree with their take that he should not have kept his position because he did not maintain speed. You can't just give the guy's position back. I think that's warranted. But then if you send Byron to the back, then it's equal. Everybody's kind of like where they should be. So difficult situation that NASCAR put themselves in, and it's going to be very fascinating to see if Denny Hamlin's going to have time this season to pay back all the guys that he has on his list. Because I feel like that list is getting longer and longer. I feel like I said it either was last week or the week after. Postpone
his retirement at this point.
Exactly.
He's
got to
stick around.
Yeah. So, I mean, I said it a couple of weeks ago, like there's no way that Denny Hamlin talks the talk and doesn't walk the walk, but I'm getting to the point now where I'm like, how is he going to pay all these guys back if he has, if he doesn't want to be detrimental to his own race at this point, and
that's the part about it that I think is the difference between maybe a younger driver and somebody like Denny Hamlin, where he's not going to go out and flat out dump somebody and get a penalty of his own and all these kind of things. Yeah. Even though he almost did that this past weekend, which is more of a heat of the moment.
I think he tried.
Yeah, he tried. But I think he kind of said it post race where he's going to race them very hard in certain situations. When he's racing against these guys that have kind of done him wrong over the course of the season, they're going to know that he's not going to give an inch. And we saw it earlier this year at Pocono, where you can make a case that Hamlin didn't flat out wreck Ross Chastain, but he sure as well didn't give him any
pretty
break.
Much.
He essentially put him in the wall, but it was something where it benefited Hamlin. It ruined Chastain's race, and it's not something he could have been penalized for. And I think those are the situations that Hamlin is going to, quote unquote, pay somebody back with, kind of like going back to when he was paid back by Chase Elliott at Phoenix way back when he got stuffed in the wall and had a cut tire and all those things.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that Elliott was going to get penalized for because it was, quote unquote, hard racing, but you knew what he was doing there as well.
You got to be careful, though. You got to be.
No, exactly. You got to be careful.
It's a dangerous game to do it like that instead of intentionally wrecking somebody.
Yep.
Like,
I mean, both are dangerous, but
100%. But if you're looking at it from Denny Hamlin's perspective and you're going for a championship here, you're playing with risky hand here. If you want to try and execute a plan like that, what he did with Chastain, or if you do the thing that Elliott did to Hamlin in that situation, not a Matt Kenseth, a Joey Logano at Martinsville, but there's a line there. And I think NASCAR is going to monitor it pretty closely because of Hamlin's comments in the media. He's taken to it and he's, definitely vocalized his displeasure with multiple drivers this season. So will that happen in the playoffs here? And, in a situation like that, you got to be really careful that you don't jeopardize your own race. And
just look last year when Harvick kind of had it in his head that Elliott might do something and he outbraked himself. Right? I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but that's kind of what it looked like happened. Yeah. And so I think it could be something where if Hamlin doesn't advance at a certain point or something like that, where maybe then he kind of goes into business for himself. But yeah, I'm fascinated to see how it plays out, because I could also see this being something that carries into next year where he focuses on the championship this year. If something comes about, then maybe he does something. But I'm really interested to see how he handles this, because he clearly isn't somebody that is going to talk the talk and then not back it up, it seems. But also at the same time,
that's the thing.
It doesn't make a ton of sense for him to kind of go for it in this certain situation. So I'm fascinated to see how this plays out.
Yeah. And if he waits till next year, what's the point?
Why not?
But it just doesn't make
I know what you mean.
Any sense, it just feels like, grow up at that point. Like last year was last year, this year was this year. Yeah.
I know
because if it's, Denny Hamlin can say that kind of stuff. And I mean, he's definitely had his fair share of scuffles throughout his Cup Series career for sure. You think back to Chase Elliott, he dumped him at Martinsville. He's had his, his comments and stuff, and he's been on the receiving end. I'd say less so, he hasn't been able to pay back as many people as many times as he's been taken out, or it's in some cases. So, I am really curious to see if he is able to execute some sort of plan here where maybe the 24 and the 1 are right in front of him and he tries to split the gap and they
2 for 1 special or something.
2 for 1 special. I don't know, but there's limited options for the remainder of the season where it's, safe to do something like that. And for somebody that's been as vocal as he has about the next gen car safety, you got to be really careful on how you play this if you are planning on putting a guy in the wall or doing something like that. Because, Hamlin's been taken out of situations like this, but he hasn't been, I wouldn't say necessarily wrecked. If you're wrecking a guy, you're putting him in the wall, like their day is done. But he's been spun, he's been hit, he's had a lot of track position loss because of stuff like that. But I wouldn't say his car and his day has been, totally thrown out the window on some of these cases.
You might disagree, but
he's gone on his list for sure. Well, you don't want to be in that situation at all in the first place. So, he's an interesting character. I'm not the biggest Denny Hamlin fan, but he's entertaining for the sport. Yeah. And, I think it's good that we have vocal people like that, veterans of the sport that are just, making sure that NASCAR is on their toes here and, they stay honest. So, we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. I doubt that it's going to happen at Talladega, but the Roval definitely presents an opportunity.
It's where everyone looks to.
The one. Yeah, 100%. So I don't think you can wait almost to Martinsville if they're, in that situation. But Roval seems like a prime candidate for something to happen between Hamlin, Chastain, and Byron. But how do you think this impacts the 24's outlook? We talked about Hamlin. He's in a good spot now. He's moved from +8 above the cutoff line to now +15. So, 7-point difference. That does help quite a bit in a situation like this. When you look at the 11 cars season on the super speedways, hasn't been as good as what we've traditionally seen him. And then the Roval, the Toyotas have really struggled on the road courses. So what do you think for Byron here? How do you think that this changes his outlook going from a +17 spot to now being below the cutoff line and fighting for his playoff life?
Yeah, it changes a ton in terms of the strategy you can apply to the next couple of races where at a Talladega, for example, if you're +17 going in, you can kind of see how things play out. You can ride in the back. You can wait for a big wreck, then try to take your opportunity, stuff like that. Now he's kind of put in a box where he has to go up and try to get some stage points and stuff like that. So I don't know what their plan would have been going in, whether they would have looked at the +17 and been like, okay, if we wreck out early, then we have that gap and we can try to get stage points and get an even bigger gap, or whether their plan was to ride it out and see what happens. Now they kind of have less opportunity to kind of wait and see, because if you do, that allows other guys around you to gain even more points. I think it less impacts the Roval just because they're a solid road course package anyways, and we probably would have seen them stay out for stage points anyways, because I don't quite see Byron being the race winner at the Roval, but being a top 10 threat, absolutely, and staying out, get those stage points, stuff like that. Put him in a good position, but definitely changes the outlook going into Talladega. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think with this season, especially, we've seen how beneficial stage points have been for some of these guys, especially in that first round. Like, Kyle Busch had fantastic stage points and he was only -2 of the cutoff line after having 2 DNFs and a mid-20s finish. So, for a guy that was not in a great playoff points position going into that round to still be that close shows, the stage points really helped keep him in the race. For Byron, I think you have to play. You cannot sit back in this situation. You have to try and get as many stage points as you can.
You have to be aggressive. Yeah.
And if that means getting involved in a wreck, that's just the name of the game at Talladega specifically. So you have to go up there and be aggressive, try and get your teammates to help you a little bit. But saying that, none of them are in terrific positions either. They're not a Joey Logano situation. They're not plus 35. The highest Hendrick car is plus 23 right now, and that's Larson. And that's not safe by any means if you have two bad races here. So they all have to kind of focus on themselves. Usually in the past, we've seen a Hendrick car maybe advance themselves or be so high ahead on points that they can maybe help their teammates. Yeah, exactly. Like they're on to the next round, no worries. But that's not the case right now. They got two guys below the cutoff line in Bowman and Byron. So you're going to expect two of those cars to be really aggressive. How much can their teammates, try and even that out in staying back, playing it safe, or will they try and help their teammates to get some points? So we'll see what happens with Hendrick Motorsports, because they're in a fascinating situation going into Talladega, specifically when you see the Chevrolets, how well they've worked together in the past, and the same with the Fords too. They're always very unified on those super speedway tracks. So yeah, Hamlin and Byron should be interesting to see what happens moving forward. You got any final thoughts on that topic, Kyle, moving forward? Yeah,
nothing too much. Just that NASCAR had to do something, because you can't let this kind of action go undisciplined. It opens way too big of a can of worms, where if you don't do something here and somebody does something in the next couple of races and you suspend them or you do whatever, then people go, well, what about the precedent you already set? So important to have some kind of penalty, even if they screwed it up in the race itself. And I'm glad to see they rectified that.
Definitely. I agree with you there. And there's a big hole for this 24 car to dig themselves out of now.
I wouldn't say big hole, but it's a hole. Like
you cannot have a bad Talladega, really. Like you got to finish Talladega.
Yep. That's fair.
So you can't rely on the Roval. So we'll see what happens here as the playoffs move forward, going into Talladega, with the points being just nuts. I mean, what the heck? We should just talk about the points here before we get into the next little bit here, Kyle. I mean, Joey Logano was in a good spot before. Byron's penalties, even better position now. Plus 35 to the cutoff line, or plus 37, to the cutoff line. That's pretty darn solid for the 22 car.
Man, the 22 car is not.
I don't get it.
They haven't had the dominant season or anything like that maybe some people were expecting when they started the season so well at the Coliseum and stuff like that. But they've quietly put together solid points week in, week out. And like to the point where we're one race into the round of 12 and they're plus 37 top of the standings, ahead of guys like Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, all these guys. Like he could have a bad Talladega and a mediocre Roval and be like 15 points clear. Like a quietly very strong season for them.
And that's an underrated, almost dark horse candidate for the playoffs in the championship right now, because all eyes are on Hendrick, right? They got four guys still in. Everybody looks at them. They've won, the last two championships with Larson and Elliott. So, they got the two guys there that have been really good the last 2 years, and they're still in it, but they do have two guys in there that have come to play in the playoffs. Bowman had some bad luck at Texas, but had a great first round, and Byron as well. I think he's had a really good playoffs apart from the penalty, right? So they're in Logano's just chipping away. They're executing really, really well, keeping their nose clean, staying out of trouble. And they're not putting themselves in bad spots. They're not taking penalties on pit road. They're not, doing the wrong things. Apart from Bristol, I mean, he's just been really, really solid, even though they have not been that fast. Like in the pre-race, they all talked about Joey Logano going to be fast today at Texas. First run kind of falls back, and he just kind of gets lost in the back half of the top 10, early teens. Well, of course, there's a lot of strategy involved in that race and blown tires and whatever, but I think what they have done is they have not gone too aggressive with their setups to put themselves in a bad position here. They keep it very, nice and tidy. And for a guy that, is having a new crew chief on the box with Paul Wolf this year, not necessarily his usual self with Todd Gordon that we've seen the championship with in the past. So the fact that they're doing this well together is pretty darn well. And this is like a Paul Wolf kind of thing, he always just kind of chips away. Like this reminds me so much of Brad Keselowski a little bit in 2012, where they were probably a bit faster than the 22 car has been this season, but they really executed really well. And they beat the champion that was almost looked unbeatable for so long, in Jimmie Johnson that year. So Logano is a fascinating one for sure, and they're in a really good spot moving forward.
Yeah, and not only just like the consistency and stuff to kind of put yourself in good position to advance and all these kind of things. their bread and butter so far this season has been the sub mile and a half tracks. When you look at
Gateway.
when at Coliseum, Gateway, and Darlington, those are all sub mile and a halves. Obviously, different characteristics to all of them, but the similarity is that you're talking similar track type and length to the championship race. And if you can get there, anything can happen. So Logano it's kind of weird to call him a dark horse, but that's kind of what it feels like this year. Yeah.
And then you look after Logano, Ross Chastain kept his nose clean for the most part at Texas. Plus 25.
Good trackhouse day. What can I say?
Yeah. We'll get to that in a second. But Chastain, for the amount of enemies that he's made so far this season, he hasn't quite had the chance to be repaid yet in the playoffs, I would say, considering his situation. If he has a bad Talladega, by no means safe. And then going into a Roval, payback could present itself for not just Hamlin, but almost all of JGR if they want to. So, I expect people will race him hard for sure. And, he can't really do that at Talladega as much, but the Roval for sure, he's not going to be given an inch at that track because you can push guys off into whatever lane you want and make it work best for you. So have you been impressed with Chastain so far? What are your thoughts on him like in the playoffs? Because he's kind of kept it pretty clean.
Yeah, I think impressed is the wrong word just because we've seen better speed out of them over the course of the season. But I think they've done what they've needed to do, where they've essentially kept it clean and finished races and been there at the end and stuff like that. When you look at their result at Kansas, when you look at this past weekend at Texas, at the track types that they've been good at, they've gone ahead and got the finish they needed. And now they're in a really good position going into two track types that they've literally won on this year. When you look at a super speedway, they won the Talladega race earlier this year. And then you look at the Roval and they were one of the early dominant teams on the road courses, and Trackhouse as a whole has been one of the few teams that have been good at every road course, not just kind of specific ones as well. So they're in a really good position to continue moving on and set themselves up while going into the rest of the playoffs. Granted, like you mentioned, there's always the looming threat of payback from essentially half the grid, which won't happen at Talladega, but is a threat there at the Roval. And it might not even matter at the Roval because they could go out and win Talladega again. So,
true.
But no, I've been impressed by Ross Chastain's kind of maturity, I think you might be able to say, over the playoffs, where he hasn't done anything stupid to a certain extent. But I haven't been impressed necessarily by their speed overall because they haven't necessarily been a threat to win any of these playoff races yet.
I do wonder if some of those, he was made out to be enemy number one, after all the incidents, and rightfully so, but he had a lot of speed.
I do think it was a bit overblown, but
okay. I think a lot of that speed came from like that, aggressive nature, like he really just pushed it to the limit. And since he's kind of like reined it back a little bit, I don't know if that's necessarily just a Trackhouse dip in performance. I think it's definitely a large part of the equation that people have caught up to them on the mile and a half specifically, because we had such a big gap there over the summer where there was no mile and a halves where, lots of teams can just develop and figure out what they did so well. But I do think having just that little bit of lack of consistency or aggressiveness it has plagued them just a tad bit. And I think he would probably say the same a little bit, where you want to play it a little safe, because they did come in here with quite a few playoff points considering their stellar regular season from what we were anticipating from Trackhouse. So Chastain's a fascinating one. He's got to be one that's got to be using that extra rear view mirror that they have in the next gen cars to perfection, especially at the Roval in 2 weeks time. So we'll definitely see how he does at Talladega, and we'll have this probably conversation next week, depending on what happens at the Super Speedway on Sunday. But next up, we got Kyle Larson, plus 23. A little bit disappointing in terms of overall speed again at Texas. Was, definitely a top 10 guy, top 7, you might say, but just never really had the speed that we were really anticipating from the 5 car, that we were really, really expecting. And he's the defending race winner going into last weekend. And that was the first time we, didn't pick him first overall. So Larson, he's got a little bit of work to do, I think, with that 5 team to get the overall speed up. He's very consistent, keeps his nose clean for sure. But what do you think of Larson right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is perfectly fair to say, where they haven't been on the season as a whole, they haven't been the dominant team that they were last year. They haven't been consistently.
It's hard to do that.
It's obviously hard to do that, but in terms of being consistently top 5 threats and stuff like that as well, haven't quite been that same echelon as well. But again, in the playoffs, you don't necessarily need to do that until like kind of the round of 8 time. Right now, they're perfectly fine to just keep chipping away, get solid finishes, stuff like that, get a stage win here or there if you can do it, and just kind of have some good solid races. And that's what the 5 team has kind of done to this point. And you can look at Talladega and kind of assume that they're going to blow an engine in the first 5 laps, because it kind of seems like Larson doesn't want to do these restrictor plate races anymore, or super speedways. Sorry, there's one for the jar. But then you look at the Roval and they might go out and win that race as well. And that might be a spark that can kind of get their season not necessarily back on track, because they've still been good, but kind of spark that next level. But that's definitely a team that to keep an eye on, because super speedways haven't been their strength, and it's only plus 23. If they have an early issue, you never know what the situation could be going into the Roval.
Yeah, the reliability has been something that's plagued the 5 team throughout most of the season. Ryan Blaney next up, plus 22, took a pretty good day at Texas and finished really, really strong. Maybe a little bit of a slight missed opportunity, because it seemed like he maybe had one of the fastest cars, if not the fastest car, arguably, throughout the race. He won a stage. So, he did a good job executing, but if he had track position, I think the 12 car would have been hard to beat there at the end.
Well, if anybody had track position, it kind of seemed like they'd be hard to beat.
Well, if you blow a tire, I don't know.
But yeah, and I know what you mean. They had the kind of day that I was expecting, where they were going to be up in the top 10. Yeah, that's why I picked him early, where it's one of his better tracks statistically. He was going to have a solid day. I liked some of the strategy to go out, get a stage win, stuff like that, and got a nice solid top 5 finish, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it ended up being third or fourth,
something like that. But really strong day for the 12 team, and those kind of results that they need more of, where they've been a solid team all season long, consistent, but need to start chipping away and getting closer to those P1 finishes.
Yeah. Next up, Denny Hamlin, plus 15. We've talked about him a lot. Daniel Suarez, plus 11.
Nice little day.
Not bad. That's what you're saying, taking advantage of other people's mistakes.
That's why I took him.
Weren't too fast. I love Suarez. We talked about him last week.
Yeah, exactly.
You had the balls to pick him. I didn't. But the 99 team, same as the first round, kind of just keeping it easy, nice and steady. And they're doing what their teammate is doing when they don't quite have the speed. They're doing a really good job of executing. And I don't know if anybody would have. I had Suarez making this round, but I don't know if I would have foreseen.
I had him out in the first round. So yeah.
Well, let's not talk about our first round predictions.
Wow. I'm okay with that.
Next up, Chase Elliott. Terrible day at Texas because he blew a tire. Was in the lead at that point, though, so he seemed like he had a reasonable speed for a track that has plagued him in the past with some bad luck and just lack of speed overall. But prior to the penalty to Byron, he was the last guy in, +4, and that was not looking good for the 9 car. Another first race of the round that he has had an early issue. Think back to Darlington, and then everybody was nervous at Kansas for him. And then, he kind of recovered and wasn't really a factor in being close to the bubble. But now this time, if he has an issue at Talladega early, he's going to have to rely on the Roval again. And it's not as easy as it has been in the past, I'd say, with the road courses. So Chase Elliott is definitely one that has to be a little bit more cautious this weekend at Talladega, even though he is a former race winner at this track. He's got to be really careful on how he wants to approach this race. If I'm him, I almost would want to sit in the back, because 11 points is nothing. If you win a stage, let's just say Austin Cindric, William Byron win a stage, they close that gap to 3 or 4 points. So, you got to just be there to finish and try and get a 30+ point day at Talladega, and that'll be probably pretty good at the end of it. But you cannot be involved in an early wreck if there is one. That's absolutely car's MO. +7, Chase Briscoe, last guy in on points right now, was -4 below the cutoff line prior to Byron's penalty. So I don't know how he finished in the top 10 after having an atrocious car at Texas. I mean, that speed was nowhere for the 14, but he did it. Had the right tire strategy there at the end to stay out and, be on old tires and just like try and make it to the end. But what do you think of Chase Briscoe here? Nobody really thought he was going to be in this position going into Talladega.
Yeah, nobody thought it. And you look, Talladega is always a wild card, but he at the Xfinity Series level, he had some decent runs on super speedways. If they keep it clean, if they have a solid finish, you go to a track type where it's the best that they have. Their road course package, and not necessarily the road course package, but road courses specifically for Chase Briscoe is his strong suit. And so if you have a solid day at Talladega where you just pick up points, and even if you're just plus 10 to the cut line, you got to feel pretty good if you're Chase Briscoe going into the Roval. So that's another wild card for sure.
-7, Austin Cindric, Daytona 500 champion. Somebody to keep your eye on because he was right there at Daytona.
Road courses all season long.
Could be a dark horse candidate here. If he wasn't involved in the wreck on the backstretch, there was Stenhouse. Would probably be flipped with Briscoe right now in terms of points position, I would say. He ran a pretty steady race, very similarly to Joey Logano. I felt like pretty close to him most of the race, but then had that incident there that plagued him and put him back in the pack a bit. So, but he's one that could upset the field here. And, these next two tracks line up pretty well for him. William Byron -8. We've talked about his position. Then the two big ones here that had really bad days, Christopher Bell at -25 and Alex Bowman at -26. I hate that for Christopher Bell so much because after the first round that he had, it was phenomenal. He was the first guy locked into the round of 12, on points after the first two races. And now he's in a massive, massive hole at two tracks that are not his specialty whatsoever. And he's going to need some real big help, either by himself doing spectacular things or having some really bad luck for a lot of guys that he's going to try and track down. So what do you think of Chris Bell's chances of getting out of this round, and Alex Bowman too? I mean, these two tracks specifically, Bowman probably a little bit more so on the Roval. He's actually been pretty good there, but what do you make of Bell and Bowman's chances of getting out of this round? Do you, on a percentage wise, if you could?
It's not great, just because you look at the points position and you either need 2 top 5 runs at Talladega in the Roval or a win. And anything could happen the next couple races, but I don't think either of them would be called favorites to win at Talladega or the Roval. No. Bell, I do think, is an underrated road course guy.
I agree.
It's easy to forget how good he was in the Xfinity Series on road courses, and that he got his first win at a road course, all these kind of things. He could have a really solid day there. I just don't think he's quite the win candidate when you look at all the other potential winners on a Roval. And he's had a couple solid runs at super speedways and stuff, but he's never been there to close it out or anything like that. So we'll see how it goes. Bowman seems like he's always at the front and then wrecks out. So we'll see how these next couple of races go, but big holes for a couple of guys with big teams that were kind of looked at as having solid starts to the playoffs. Obviously, Christopher Bell way more than Bowman, but even Bowman had a bit of a solid first round.
Better than what we were expecting, that's for sure.
So we'll see how it goes, but that's a tough hole to dig out of.
Definitely. So that's the point situation going into Talladega. But before we look at the draft, Kyle, a little bit of heartfelt farewell, if you will, for 7-time Cup Series champion and IndyCar. I don't even know how to describe him for IndyCar. Specialist on the ovals, Jimmie Johnson. He has announced this week he is retiring from full-time competition throughout all racing. He will do select races through the next year, couple years, whoever knows how long the driver of the 48 car in both series that he raced in will continue on for. But, it was kind of expected given his lack of performance on the road courses and his IndyCar stint. He didn't run the full schedule in his first year, only did the road courses. And then this year he added the ovals, and that's where he really, really shined. Got a top 5 finish. I think it was at Iowa. I think he finished 5th. So, Jimmie Johnson's overall picture in IndyCar, it'd be hard to claim it a success, but it was definitely interesting to watch. And Johnson, making that big jump from a art form, because it is an art form. It's an unbelievable talent you have to be to drive open wheel stuff at that level, whether that's Formula One, IndyCar, anything. The fact that Jimmie was able to come over there and still do decently in a lot of respects, and then on the ovals really show his pure talent on that kind of track was pretty special to watch. So I wish, as much as the amount of years that I watched Jimmie Johnson dominate the sport, and I'm like, when is this going to end? It was bittersweet to see him leave NASCAR and then join a different series in IndyCar, and now to think that he's done full-time competition. Like, that's just kind of like an era almost closed as a racing fan. I feel like for anybody that's kind of grew up during our time, or if you're a little older than us, younger than us, you've seen Jimmie Johnson basically for most of his special career. So moving forward, he's probably got his sights set on maybe another Indy 5 appearance, because I feel like that's another thing that he wants to do. And then trying to do the double maybe with the Coca-Cola 600. You look at that Project 91 Trackhouse car as the prime option for him to jump into a good car at a good team for a one-off race that would definitely support him, considering Chip Ganassi's ties, and as well as Trackhouse being formerly Chip Ganassi Racing. So,
and also Chevrolet, which helps.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of different ties for Jimmie Johnson to try and do that double. Of course, he wants to do Le Mans. That's one of the big ones for him. And then I imagine that he'll continue the 24 hours at Daytona. But what would you think about Jimmie Johnson doing the double, or any other things? Do you have anything that you would want to see Jimmie Johnson race in as a specialist kind of one-off race?
Yeah, it's bucket list time. He checked off the IndyCar stuff on his bucket list the last couple of years. There's obviously going to be specific races and stuff that he still does in IndyCar. But yeah, it's bucket list time. It's time to go do some stuff that you never thought you'd have the chance to do. The Le Mans NASCAR project, he's absolutely going to be a part of. I would be stunned if he isn't. Probably going to be him, Mike Rockenfeller, Jeff Gordon, and maybe somebody else in there as the main trio for that team. And then you look at some other stuff. He'll do the Indy 500. I'd be stunned if he didn't. Whether he does a double, I think, is much more of a question. Just because, do you want to not do something with Hendrick Motorsports? Do you want to test yourself? Do you want to put all your focus on the Indy 500? All these kind of things. Like I could see him skipping the Coke 600 and just doing the Indy 500. I could also see him doing an Xfinity race with Junior Motorsports at some different track or something like that. I think he'll go back to IndyCar and do Long Beach again, just because that's the home race and stuff like that. If we're getting really out there, I'd love to see him go out and try the Bathurst 1000 with some team and go and really try some different stuff. And do a wild card there. Go back to his roots, maybe do the Baja 1000 or Dakar, or there's a bunch of different stuff that he could do. So it's bucket list time for Jimmie Johnson over the next couple of years before he's really done. But I think the next year we could see him doing some really fun different things.
I don't know if he'd ever do the Daytona 500 again, considering everything.
I doubt it.
I feel like that's
why?
It doesn't make too much sense. I'd be curious, if it's not the Coke 600, what NASCAR race would he feel like you want to do? Because I would have pegged 100% Auto Club Speedway, because that's the track that he was really good at, and that's his home track. And
if he does another NASCAR race, I think it would be Chicago Street or the new Auto Club.
It breaks my heart to say new Auto Club. I don't like it. You
don't like many things that are changed, though.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not good with change on that stuff, but especially Auto Club. But Jimmie Johnson is a guy that has got so much talent, probably more than people have in their thumb, behind the wheel of a race car. It's special to watch. And while his IndyCar experience wasn't quite what he was probably expecting or hoping for,
I think it kind of was, to be honest.
You think so? Really?
I think so. Well, he was never a road course ace in NASCAR. He had one road course win there, and it probably should have gone to Marcus Ambrose, if I remember the race correctly. Yeah. And so I think he went there wanting to try something out and try to do something that he always wanted to try. He started just doing the road courses just from a pure danger perspective. And I don't think he ever expected it. Maybe it was a bit tougher of a learning curve than he anticipated to an extent, but I don't think he ever expected to be a race win candidate. I don't think he ever expected to be a top 10 candidate. I think he expected to kind of be a guy that was at the back of the pack, take advantage of other people's issues if he could. I think maybe by the end of the second year, he expected to be a bit more competitive on a regular basis. He had a couple solid outings, but nothing that was really strong on true pace. And then I think this year we kind of saw the strengths and his oval racing and his adaptability on ovals and things like that, and all those kind of things. So I think he gets a bad rap for the IndyCar stuff, which I think is completely misplaced, because drivers trying different things outside of their discipline should be supported, welcomed, celebrated like it used to be way back in the day, and not kind of clowned on because somebody is trying something completely different and is at the back of the pack and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it was obviously not quite what he expected in terms of being as competitive, but he had some solid performances on the ovals. He got to check off the Indianapolis 500 if he doesn't go back or if he doesn't qualify or whatever it is. He had a really solid qualifying and everything like that. And we'll see what the next year holds. Like, I don't think Jimmie Johnson ever thought he'd be in line to do Le Mans or anything like that as well. So I'm excited to see what the next year holds.
Man, you know how badly I want to see him and Kyle Busch to do the double at the same time. That would be so much fun to watch if they were able to time that out. Kyle going to a McLaren fourth car and then Johnson going to another Chip Ganassi car or something like that. Oh man, that would be something special to watch. But see what happens with Jimmie. We'll keep a close eye on it, see how he does. He's had success in the other art forms of racing before. I doubt that this will be the last we see of Jimmie Johnson hoisting trophies or being in contention for wins before his career is all said and done at the end of the day. So congrats to Jimmie Johnson on his IndyCar career. Being full-time this year was a big step for him, and overall, it was fun to watch, especially the oval stuff. He was always a guy that the broadcast wanted to highlight because he was doing so well compared to his normal road course stuff. So we'll see what happens with Jimmie Johnson and where he will end up racing next year and what race he will end up racing next year and for the years to come. So any final thoughts on Jimmie Johnson? Any other topics, Kyle, before we get into the Talladega draft?
No, I think we're good to go.
All righty. Draft time. Here we go. I don't want to talk about Texas, but you can mention what happened because I got screwed. I mean,
wow, he's saying he got screwed.
I was out to toast, as Kyle would like to say, out at Texas.
So before we get too far in, my question is do I deduct the 25 points for William Byron from your score or no?
Go ahead. Well, I don't even know does that count towards his race overall?
It doesn't.
Right? It's just a 25 point penalty in general.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, then no, because we're talking about Texas.
Well, I wanted to ask because if it did, that would put you sub 100 points.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I am sub 100 points in my head, in my heart too.
Yeah. So Lukas had a tough one. He finished with 101 points, which I'm pretty sure is the lowest so far. Good day for William Byron with 43 points.
Good year.
Good day for Denny Hamlin, which is kind of funny that you had both of them with 36 points. And then Kevin Harvick had 18.
We can skip the rest.
Christopher Bell had 3, and Kyle Busch had 1. So I would like to thank you for taking Bell and
Kyle Busch because you wanted them real bad.
2 guys that I wanted. Yeah. For me, it went quite well. I beat the field again. Not a big deal. 198 points. Blaney leading the way for me with 43 points. So first time I see you. The first time that the first overall pick is at least tied for the most amount of points, which is interesting after you criticized my first overall pick. But Ryan Blaney with 43 points. I didn't say I
criticized it.
You said you wouldn't have taken him in the 2-3, which I think is enough. But then Larson had 38 points, Chastain 39, Suarez 38, and Tyler Reddick, the 9th overall pick, winning the race with 40 points.
I wanted Reddick. Let's just make that clear. I really hoped you missed him.
But if you took him 10th overall, he wouldn't have won because the 9th overall thing.
Yeah, well. Anyways, can we talk about the good stuff that I had happen on me?
One more thing, just the guys that we missed on in the race. Okay. Joey Logano with 46 points, a really good points day for him.
Nobody saw that coming.
We missed on him. And then Brad Keselowski converting the pole into a really solid points day with 39 points. He was the other big one.
Could have won that race.
Yeah. If they didn't have that extra pit or whatever it was that they had to do.
Yeah.
Nice little couple of weeks for Roush and going to track type where they won both obviously different track, but they won both of the duels earlier. So
yes, they did.
We'll see how that plays into the coming segment. But It's draft time.
Can we talk about what I did though?
Go for it. Whatever you want to do.
I mean, you probably have the points, don't you? Do you have the points for our weekly league?
In app, I can pull it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it is first overall or like the best week that we've had amongst us, but I feel like it's pretty darn close because I had in our league. I'll pull it up too because I remember who I drafted. I had Joey Logano,
38.
Yeah.
So
that's got to be up there with most points. It's got to be
this year the most. Let me see. So this year the most I think is actually me, which is really funny. I had 200. Oh, it's you actually. At Richmond, you had 273 points.
273 points.
Yeah.
Which Richmond?
Playoff Richmond, I believe.
There's no playoff Richmond.
Or late Richmond, or I don't know. Or was it Richmond? I'm looking at the wrong year. That's why. I was looking at last year's results. That'll do it.
Teasing me. Oh my God.
Sorry. So that's the most we've ever had. This year, the most is me somehow. And I had 240 points at Kansas.
This Kansas?
Yeah.
Oh no. So how much did I miss it by? 6 points?
2, I think. I think you had 238. No?
Did I have 238?
Yep, 238. So missed it by 2 points.
You're kidding me. Yep. Oh my God.
But the most we've ever had is 273, which was you at
I'll take it. But we had more points back then with the bonus points and stuff.
Just saying.
So
I'm just saying.
So to go over my lineup quickly, because I got to toot my own horn here, because I was really for a crazy race.
Whatever.
I had William Byron, Tyler Reddick, Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, and then a Garage Bowman. And then the bonus picks, the only one that I got wrong was Christopher Bell. I picked him over Denny Hamlin. Other than that, I think I missed out on like 13 points overall because Hamlin was not the 5th highest score, but the other 4 were the top 4. So not bad.
If only you could do that on the show.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? But you get the choice, good sir. Do you want the first overall pick like we have for the first 4 drafts that we've had of this, or are you going to defer and make me change the graphics template and for yourself too?
No, I'm taking first overall, of course.
Okay.
Mainly for the 9th overall pick because it's back on this game.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Had a week off. Had a nice bye week.
Yep. Alrighty. First overall pick.
Do you even know where you're going here? I do.
Okay. There's one driver I want specifically, so I'm glad to take him. And that's Bubba Wallace, first overall. Okay. Has been arguably, statistically, whatever you want to say, the most consistent driver on super speedways over the last couple of years. Looking over the last 10 super speedway races, he's been double-digit points every single time. So he hasn't wrecked out early in any of those. He's been around at least to the end, and he's crashed a few times, as anyone does. But when he does wreck, he at least gets some points. But looking over the last couple of years, since 2021, he's been over 25 points every single time. And looking recently, you're talking 36 points Daytona 500 or the regular season finale. There it is. 36 points there. 30 points Talladega earlier this year, 43 points at the Daytona 500. And then last year, of course, won the rain shortened race at Talladega, was up there in the regular season finale, and Daytona 500 was in the mix until some pit road issues and stuff like that. So this is a guy that has consistently over the last 2 years been in the mix for race wins, for stage wins, for everything at these super speedways. And so of the chaos that is super speedway racing, I'm confident taking Bubba Wallace as somebody that should at least be there, at least into the second half of the race and get me some kind of points.
Yeah, I mean, he's in the owner points battle here too. So
yeah, exactly. And after a tough Texas as well, they need a good points day.
Yeah. So, that's a pretty solid first overall pick considering the options and the uncertainty that goes into a race like this. The defending race winner, you can do a lot worse than Bubba Wallace. For myself, oh lordy lord, this is gonna be a tough situation for me to try and wiggle my way out of. One guy that I know for sure that I would like is the number 6, Brad Keselowski.
Okay.
I think the 6 car could be somebody that does really, really well this weekend, has been pretty solid on the super speedway so far this season, but I always think of Brad Keselowski as a really good Talladega super speedway racer, especially when the 2 car was in its prime, kind of like early 2010s, mid 2010s there. The 2 car was stout on these kind of tracks. So I'll say that speed that we've seen recently from RFK translates to the super speedway track here this weekend. For the second pick for myself, 3rd overall in the draft, I feel like this is a round that Ryan Blaney should excel. I'm going to take the 12 car as my next selection.
I wanted him. Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan Blaney is a guy that was so close to winning the Daytona 500 in the spring, and has always been really good at Talladega. It feels like he's always in the right spot and can avoid the wrecks, and he's not too aggressive where he puts himself in bad positions and wrecks the fields like his teammate does. Overall, 11 place average finish of the last 7 races at Talladega, 146 laps led. Ryan Blaney is a really stout contender here to win this weekend and not have to worry about the Roval the next weekend after that.
Yeah, really like those couple of picks. Those are 2 of the best super speedway racers in the field, and
I got
consistently up there. Yeah,
the guys
consistently
that are up there.
Yeah. The 4-5 for me. I'll go 4th overall with somebody that is a bit boomer bust and kind of has been over a super speedway career, and that's Chase Elliott. Somebody that is either a top 3, top 5 finisher or wrecks everybody. But we saw him obviously a bit different in terms of the race type and everything, but he did win the kind of new super speedway-esque Atlanta. And he's somebody that has been better at Talladega than he has Daytona as well. Looking over the last handful of races, had a really solid Talladega finish earlier this year. Last year had some mediocre finishes at Talladega, but he's somebody that, looking over the averages and everything like that, is somebody that the good results outweigh the poor ones. So I will take Chase Elliott with the 4th overall pick. And 5th overall is where it starts to get really interesting, because the field really starts to kind of diverge and everything like that.
It's a crapshoot, man.
It absolutely is. But a team that is always up there collecting stage points and everything like that is Penske. So I will take Joey Logano with my next pick, just because he's always a shoo-in to get at least 10, 9, 8 points, something like that. And then usually wreck out in the middle of the race because of an aggressive block or something like that. But always gets some good stage points, always has a decent day. I'm interested to see what they do strategy-wise, having their big points gap, but knowing them, they'll be right at the front, trying to lead as many laps as they can. So I'll take Joey Logano with the 5th pick here.
I really, really wanted him.
That's too bad.
Because, like you said,
here's one.
He's the stage point maestro at these tracks. He always wins a stage. You can bet. If there's a bet for that, I'm betting it every time, because he's so good at it.
I'll add a new wrinkle to the draft. I'll offer you a trade. Joey Logano for Ryan Blaney. Do you want it?
No.
Hey. No. I had to
There's no
toss it out there.
trade in here at the draft unless I get future considerations.
What are your future considerations?
First
13th overall pick
and the 2nd overall pick every single week.
All righty, take your 6th pick.
That's a tough situation for me to try and get out of here. Damn. I really, really wanted Logano, but I'm going to. I don't know. I'm gonna take Justin Haley for the next pick.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know, man. He's always so good at these tracks.
Yeah.
And it's no fluke that he's always up there for the lead. And I don't know. It feels like it's going to be a crazy race, and maybe the 31 car sees this as an opportunity to win a race.
Should. They should at the very least.
I don't, even if they are aggressive or if they sit at the back, whatever they decide to choose, I think Justin Haley will be somebody to definitely keep your eye on here this weekend. The first time draftee for us in the draft, along with Brad Keselowski on my side. So 2 new faces on my side so far. Will I add a third? Damn, this is a really, really, let's do it. Let's take both RFK cars. Chris Buescher.
Okay.
Yeah. I like the Fords, man. They always are the best at getting on and off pit road for green flag pit stops. In my opinion, they always seem to work the best with that. And they always work well in numbers, and they always seem to have a lot of them up the front, no matter what situation, if there's a big wreck or whatever. And Chris Buescher just seems like he has quite a bit of momentum right now. Obviously the win at Bristol, but Texas didn't quite go to plan for the 17 car, but they did show some decent speed there overall. So I think they're peaking at the right time a little bit here late in the regular season, or late in the regular season, they were peaking really well. And then now in the playoffs, they're trying to find that good form. So Chris Buescher is my 4th selection.
Yep. I like that. Time to round it out for myself here. The 8-9 wraparound to round out my
Who's gonna
lineup.
win?
8th overall. I'm going to another veteran. And it's a playoff guy who's been one of the best on super speedways over recent memory, and that's Denny Hamlin. He's been better at Daytona kind of overall. But he's had a bad swing of luck this year at the super speedways. I could see that luck swinging back around in his favor this time around. Just somebody that has consistently shown his skill at super speedways. And I just can't leave him undrafted for myself in this last wraparound. So I will take Denny Hamlin with the 8th pick and 9th overall, which means that there's a decent chance they're going to win the race.
75% right now. Oh
once
my God.
again is going to be my 9th overall pick. Out of the last 5 Talladega races, 4 top 10 finishes. He's somebody that is always in the mix at super speedways, but especially Talladega. So I like Erik Jones this weekend. He'll round out my lineup.
You suck. You suck so bad. I wanted Erik Jones. Shoot. Oh my God, Kyle. I need my Ryan Newman right now. Where is he at? Oh God. This is brutal. Last pick. You know, a guy who's just been so much in the news. Kyle Busch is going to round up my lineup for Talladega.
My God.
I'm going to say
just punting on it.
Unlikeliest places, the place where you're bound to wreck, the guy that seems to wreck and blow up at every single place. He turns it around this weekend at Talladega. He finished 3rd here in the spring. It's a shot in the dark.
Good point, actually.
I gotta try and assume that maybe, just maybe, the 18 cars luck will turn around here at Talladega. So he rounds out my lineup.
Good stuff. Good show.
Good stuff. Good show. Overall, very, very pleased with it. Yeah, great one. Any final thoughts before? Oh, is your winner pick Erik Jones? Is that what we're going with?
I mean, it kind of has to be, but I'll say Chase Elliott gets it done. Why not?
You're boring. You're so boring. I'm going to say that
I don't want to pick Brad Keselowski because that would have been my pick, but
yeah,
he's on your team. So.
I'm going to say another upset here. I'm going to say Justin Haley wins this weekend at Talladega. Let's go out on a limb. But
good stuff.
Yeah, great episode. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at Talladega, but make sure to follow us on Instagram and on TikTok. We will have some clips coming for you this week. Don't worry on that. We will find some time for that. But great episode overall. We will talk to you very, very soon. But for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman signing off for now. Make sure to go subscribe, like the YouTube channel, like the YouTube video and give us a follow and subscribe as well. But we will talk to you after Talladega to tee up the round of 12 finale at the Roval. Enjoy the races, everybody.